Hey guys, it's Treasure here, your instructor for the 3D animation crash course in Blender. In our last lesson, we explained how to navigate your way in Blender. And in this lesson, we're going to be creating your first project in Blender. Also, please make sure to join our WhatsApp channel to access the course files for our lessons. So, let's get started.
Hello everyone, welcome to the creation phase of this Introduction to Blender chapter. Now this is where we left off in the navigation chapter. We added a bunch of objects and familiarized you with Blender's UI. So if you watch that, you know that I'm panning around the scene with my middle mouse button. I'm zooming in with the middle by scrolling up and down on that button, and I hold shift and the middle mouse button to move around. So I'm doing that, and if you follow the navigation phase, you should be able to do that as well. So now we are going to go into creating a project in Blender, specifically this sample project. Now some of you who follow the navigation part of this chapter might have an idea on how we are going to make this. Nonetheless, we're going to make this sample and show you how to render it or get an image output like this. Alright, so to get started, we are going to create a new project. We are not going to use this old one. You can come around and touch up on it later. But for now, we're going to create a new project. So go to new, go to general, ignore all of these. These are some presets, UIs for depending on what you want to do in Blender. So we'll just go to new, general, click OK. And now Blender will always start out with the default cube. So right now I don't want any of them. So if I want to select everything out here, just press A on your keyboard, letter A for Apple, and it will select everything. As you can see on our outliner here, everything is selected. And then press delete or X. You can press X on your keyboard and delete everything, or you can just press delete. So now, to start creating our scene, we are first going to get a floor. And to add a floor, if you come to add mesh, we can use a plane. So a plane is a square. You can see that it has no depth or whatever. It's just a simple square in space. So now we've added our plane. We're going to increase the size. So again, I told you press S on your keyboard for scale. And now we can scale it up. So one fun thing is that you can actually input the size. If you notice up here on this top corner here, you'll notice that as you are increasing the size of the sphere, it's actually recording the size of it. Over here on this top bar here is showing you the size on the X, the size on the Y, and the size on the Z. So if we just type in like 10, you can notice that it's registering what we typed in around here. So you can type in the exact unit measurements or the exact unit size that you want something to be in Blender. When you're scaling, when you're rotating, maybe you want to rotate it exactly 90 degrees. Once you are in that scale mode or rotate mode or move mode, you can type in the exact values or numbers that you want that object to be transformed in. So you can type, just if you are rotating and you want it rotated in just 90 degrees or rotated in just 45 degrees, you can type that in. And if you are moving an object and you want to be moved 10 units or moved 4 units or whatever, you can just type that in and it's Blender will register that. So now that we've typed out 10, 10 is a good value. 10 is a good value for plane, and press enter to register that. And now the next thing we're going to do is to add a monkey head. Now, if you're surprised at how did I bring out this option, that means you didn't pay attention in the navigation section, but that's cool. Shift and A on your keyboard. Again, if you come to this add and just hover over it, you can see the shortcut, which is Shift A. So Shift and A. Then let's add a monkey head. So now you notice the monkey is already looking forward, even though to us it's as if it's looking at its side. One thing I forgot to mention in the navigation bar is that Blender actually has orientation. So Blender has forward. This is the forward. If you have a keyboard and you have a numpad on your keyboard, if you press 1, you're going to go to the front view. So notice it says front orthographic. We will talk about this later on. So it says front orthographic. So it's currently in the front view. If you press 3, you go to the right. If you press 7, you go to the top. If you press 9, you go to the bottom. If you press Control and 3 on your numpad, you go to the left. So if you are using a laptop that does not have a numpad and you want to be able to swap, you can actually still swap among these views with your normal number keys. However, you have to make sure that the emulate numpad option is activated. So to do that, you go to Edit, Preferences, and make sure this emulate numpad is checked. And I remember we checked this in the navigation section. So now if you press 1 on your keyboard, you should be able to look forward. If you press 3, you look to the side. If you press 7, you look from the top. If you press 9, you look from the bottom, and so on and so forth. So right now we have our monkey in here. Let's bring it up a little bit. If you're wondering let's bring it up a little bit, pressing G and pressing Z to move it all just on the Z axis, up on the Z axis. So now my movement is constrained on the Z axis. So G, Z, and click to accept that. So now, according to our scene here, we're going to position the monkey on top of this floor that we have created here. And to do that, we're going to need to rotate it a little bit. So remember, you can move your objects or rotate your objects from here. So just don't click the rotate tool. In fact, I like to drag this thing out so I can see them clearly. So rotate it a little bit. Use the move tool to move it down. Okay, a little bit. Come to rotate again. Click on the red bar because I want to rotate on the Z on the X axis. So rotate on the X a little bit. And let's just move it forward a bit. Yeah, maybe a little bit back. All right. So next thing I want to add is a Shift A. We're going to add a cube. Yeah, because in the render we're trying to create, there is a giant cube behind the monkey. So we're gonna add a cube in here to make it look a bit fancy, make it look a little bit good. Nothing special. We're going to add a cylinder object in here, and I want the cylinder to be long or be taller, if know what I mean. So what that means is we're going to have to scale it on the X-axis, on the Z-axis, which is up and down. Remember, in Blender, the Z-axis is up and down. So let's come to the scale option, to come to the scale tool, click on this, click on the Z-axis, the blue arrow, and then it will scale on just the Z-axis. So do that, move tool. So again, you can either be using these options if you are not familiar with the shortcuts, or you can just press S, press Z, or just press S to go into scale mode, press Z to scale on just the Z axis, and it's almost the exact same thing. And press G, Z on Z axis. But the shortcuts are just more convenient. However, if you're a beginner, it might seem confusing for you. So let's add a few more things, like let's say a UV sphere, which is kind of a 3D circle. Nah, but it's not a circle, it's a sphere. And you're wondering, you might be asking me, why are we having these small boxes stuff on the sphere? Now, this is what I mean. Now, this is why it's called a 3D mesh, all right? We'll explain more about this when we go into the modeling chapter. But if you look very carefully, the cracks or um, the cracks or the deformations on this sphere are in the shapes of squares. So this spherical object is actually made of a bunch of little squares put together. So those squares put together is what we call a mesh. That's why it's called a 3D mesh. So again, I will explain more of this in the modeling chapter. But just know that every single 3D object you see here is made up of these polygons or made up of little squares. So this is a cube. This cube is made up of one square. This square here, this is also made up of squares as well, and the giant circle here. So a 3D mesh is just made up of a bunch of small squares coming together, or triangles. It's made up of a bunch of small squares or triangles coming together. However, this doesn't look too appealing. So if you want this to look smoother, what I want you to do is not left click now, but right click on your mouse key, right click, and you'll notice something called shade smooth. So you can choose shade smooth or shade auto smooth. So I prefer auto smooth because it just automatically smooths it up. If you press just shade smooth, it's roughly the same result, but I just prefer auto smooth. Just choose shade auto smooth. So try it with this one, shade auto smooth, and it will smooth out the edges. If you don't like that, you can just do shade smooth, but this doesn't look too appealing. I prefer shade auto smooth. And for the cylinder as well, shade auto smooth. Yeah. So let's quickly add a cone in here. So let's quickly add a cone in here. So I don't add it in the middle of this place anymore. Again, remember I showed you what this cursor does in the navigation phase. So let's click somewhere around here. So this will be our spawn point or appearance point for our object. So now we're going to add a cone in here. And remember, we can't, if it's in cursor mode, we can't move it. We are just adjusting the cursor instead of moving the object. So we need to go into our move tool, or you can press G again on your keyboard to move this into place. So we want to move it up. So on this Z axis, move it up, put it somewhere, make this a little bit smaller, press S to scale it down, move it in. Then we can also duplicate this because we just want to have a few squares on the side. So Shift D. So in Blender, to duplicate things, you press Shift D to duplicate things. And now you can move this around. Maybe S to scale, make it a bit bigger. So right now, all you need to do is just have fun setting up your shapes. I want to rotate this a little bit more, so you can press if you press this blue circle here to rotate it on the Z axis a little bit, and maybe move this back a bit, move this up. I need to move this up as well. Maybe increase the size of this, press S to scale, so make it bigger, the back for balance, then push it up so it's on top of our floor. And okay, duplicate it one more time, press Shift D to duplicate an object, then move it in, maybe make this smaller, so we have smaller objects to fill up our first scene. And okay, you can see it's clipping through, it's falling through the floor, it's going through the floor. Just move this up so it doesn't go through the floor. and maybe shift D to duplicate this to the other side as well. Okay, okay, so move this in around here. Okay, so this doesn't look bad for our first scene. You can go crazy about it. There is no rules right here. What I want you to do is to be familiar with the UI and render something. So that is why you are going through this process. That's the purpose of this particular um, video. So it's clipping, this is clipping here. So let's move this out a bit. All right, and also right click and shade auto smooth to make it look smooth. All right. So right now you'll notice that this thing is just white, and we want to add a little bit of color in here. So how do you give this object colors? So if you make sure, so if you select any object, make sure you select an object. So if you select that object and you come to this property bar over here now, everything here looks intimidating. We're not going to cover every single thing here, but just a few of them. So you'll notice that each of these tabs, if you click on them, they are their own tablet. They are their own tabs. So right now, the one we're going to go to is this one here that looks like a circle or something that is called material. So this is where you can change the appearance of an object. So click on it, and now it's empty. Right now, just press new. It will give your object a new material, and that material will come with a color and a few other options here. So since this is a place where you change color, why isn't it just called color? Why is it called material? And that's because materials define more than just color. Like I said earlier, it defines the appearance of an object, but it also defines what the surface of an object is made of. It also affects how shiny the surface is, how metallic it is, how transparent it is. So it's not just color. So that's why it's called material. And so if we click on this right now, the color is white and we make it red, you will notice that nothing is happening. And right now it shows that the object has a red color, but it's not showing here. And that is because in order for us to see our materials, we need to be in the material viewport. So to get to the material viewport, you will notice these little buttons over here. So if you hover your mouse over here, you'll notice that this is called viewport shading and specifically material preview. If you click on it, it changes to the material viewport. Now, why does Blender do this? In Blender, there are 4 viewport types. There is the solid by default. The viewport type that we have been working with all this time is called the solid viewport. And 3D softwares, like I said in the installation video, 3D softwares are very beefy and they really use a lot of resources, especially when you want to render. So to save on your system's resources, Blender and many other 3D softwares would by default put your objects in what we call a solid viewport. It doesn't have any colors, it doesn't have any materials, it doesn't have any lighting because those things, for the computer to calculate those things, it is very, very taxing and expensive on your system. So it uses a lot of resources to calculate that. So to prevent that and just allow you to work without dealing with the lagging of your computer trying to calculate the materials or the lights, you have your solid viewport. So there are 4 viewport modes. There's a solid view that previews that is just like a preview mode that doesn't have any material, it doesn't have any light. There is the material view that allows you to preview materials, but that material viewport does not have light information. So if you are in the material mode, you will notice that it doesn't really have any lighting information here. There is the wireframe mode that allows you to see through objects, and there is a wireframe mode, which is this one over here, that allows you to see through objects. It's like reveals this. It allows you to see through objects. And finally, there is the rendered view that calculates everything, the lights condition. So our render is like this because there are no lights in our scene, and we'll come to that later. So for now, let's just go to the material mode and then material viewports. And right now, the other objects are white because they don't have any material. The default material in Blender is white. So if we let's change this to yellow. Listen, you can give this thing any color you like. Um, feel free. So if we change our floor to something like, let's say, green, it's just like any, if you've used a graphic design software before, moving this circle up and down will darken the color, and moving this then we'll around the wheel will change the color of the surface. So I want you to give it create a surface, any kind of surface that you like. Create any kind of use any kind of color that you like, and just keep adding new materials for every single one of them. Repeat this process. So I'm just going to be adding some colors here. Doesn't have to be crazy. Listen, you have as much creative control over the colors as you can, as you want to. Go ahead and have fun. I'm just going to be adding colors, add colors to every single one of them. So remember, click on the objects, make sure you're in the material bar, press new to add a new material. And that is how you create materials. So I'm just going to be adding colors over here. Looks like I've run all of the color. It looks like I've run out of color palette. Anyway, we've successfully added colors to all shapes. So feel free to add any color that you like. I'm going to just touch this up a little bit here. So it's okay. So this is now the colors on your objects. So now that we're done adding colors to our object, let's see how this will look like in the rendered view. So you can remember I told you that there is a render view mode. So you can either get them from here, or you can press Z on your keyboard, Z for zebra. And these are all the 4 viewport modes. So if you go to the rendered view over here, you would notice that our colors are there, but the environment looks dull. And the reason for that is because there is no light in our environment. So to add the lights, come to add again, but this time the object we're adding is not a mesh, we're coming down to light. So you can select a point light over here, and now you'll notice that something changes. So all of a sudden this object has lights here. So you move this up over here. So the lights are indicated by this tiny objects over here. For all I know, you can decrease the size of it, the size of this stuff, but this is how a light object looks, a point light. So now if you come to your property bar, make sure that it's on this data property here, this light icon here. You would see different options or properties of the light objects. So what you need to do now, so from here we can increase the brightness of the light. It's not too bright, it's very dim. So if we increase this to say 100, it's a lot brighter now. So you can just move it around, and you can also add multiple lights to your scene. You can also change the color of the lights over here, make it yellow, put on the colors of the object yellow, make it blue, turn it blue, orange, whatever color, but you know what, let's just keep it on white for now. Then we can add multiple lights. You don't have to use just one light, so add another light. And remember, it's appearing in the place where our cursor is. So now I'll move this one up, move this to the side so we can light the other side that is dark, and just increase the intensity of this one. So maybe 100 as well to move it up. So let's click on the first light. So the lighting strategy we want to use, or the lighting format we want to use, is the 3-point lighting system. if you are shooting, if you are lighting a scene, mostly a still scene whereby objects will not be moving that much, the three-point light system is a good way for you to light your object. So what are the components of a three-point lighting system? You have a key light, which is the brightest light in your scene. Because of how bright it is, it creates a very dark shadow on your objects, especially the places that don't receive light. So in order to make sure that those places are not completely in darkness or completely black, you add another light or the on the opposite side of the key light called the fill light. So that light is not as bright as the key light, it's a lot less brighter. But what that one does is to fill up the shadows to make sure that those parts of the object are not completely black, that you can actually see what those parts of the objects are, the parts that the key light does not hit. And then finally, you have a rim light. So what the rim light does is that it just creates this highlight around the objects when you light it up, just to make sure that it gives the object dimensions and separates it from the background. So let's try to do that over here with our scene. Yeah. So we're going to assume that this guy over here will be our key light. And so we're going to increase its intensity. 100 is not enough. We'll increase it to, let's say, maybe 1000. Right now it's very, very bright. Okay. Maybe we should take that down to like 500. Yeah, that's a lot better. This would be our fill light because hold on, sorry, if I delete this, you'll notice that there are shadows in this place. You can't see what's on this corner. You can actually, but there is a loss of dimensions. You can't see the shape of the object in this corner. So Control Z to undo that deleting, and we're going to make this our fill light. So let's move this around here, somewhere around here. So now it's not as bright as this one, but you can see whatever shape was here. You can see the shape here. And one more thing about your light is that you want to enable contact shadows. Click on this one, enable contact shadows as well. So if you notice when it's disabled, just look at this part of the monkey when it's disabled and when it's enabled. It just helps to make your um, render look a lot better. So let's add another light. Let's shift A. Let's add another light, shift A. Let's add another point light and just move it to the back. This one will be our rim light. So enable contact shadows and make this. This one can be really bright, but the only difference is that it won't be visible. It won't be like directly on top of our object, just at the back, to give them some dimension. So if you notice this place, this is a highlight. This is exactly what a rim light is made for. It's just to kind of like highlight your shapes and separate them from the background, especially when we're going to be rendering this from the front. So that's what it does basically. So keep that somewhere at the back over here, just to give our object some dimensions. And maybe to separate this one, maybe we'll give this one a color of maybe should we orangey color. Maybe we'll color this other light as well, make this light blue. And cool, that's cool. So now you notice that the world background, we're still in our rendered view, all right, but the world background is kind of just plain. How do you make it a lot more lively? So to get to the world background, on this property bar, come to the world icon over here that looks like a map. Click on it, and now you see that the reason it's gray is because the background color is gray. So if we change this up to something else, that doesn't look very good. But you notice that the background color changes. So instead of using this, we want to use like a sky background. So So if you click on this circle, you can change this to a sky texture. There are different things, just choose sky texture. So right now it's showing this. Let's change from Nishita to Pritam. And this kind of like shows you a preview of what the world will look like under the sun, how where you want the it kind of like shows you a preview of Earth and where you want the light to be hitting it. So if you want the light to hit, if you want it to look as if the sun is hitting the object from the side, you can move it to the side. So now it looks like a sunset because it's as if the sun is hitting us from the side. Then if you move it towards this way again, it's still going to be the same. If you move it completely black, it's going to try to stimulate nighttime. So right now it doesn't. Let's move it a little bit. Let's just leave it by default. So right now it still doesn't look good. And this is because in order for our render to look good, there are a few settings that we need to enable. So if we come to our render settings over here, you'll notice that our render engine, Blender has two render engines. So our render engine right now is Eevee. So there's Eevee here, there is Ignore Workbench, there's Eevee, and there's Cycle. So Cycles will look more realistic and better looking than Eevee. However, Eevee can still look good. In fact, every single render I've made has been made with Eevee. So you know that Eevee can produce good looking results as much as Cycles. So for now, let's focus on Eevee. We'll come to Cycles soon. To make it look good, you need to enable some settings, and I'm not sure why they were not enabled out of the box, but the first one here, the first render setting that you need to enable is ambient occlusion. So the moment you click it, you notice some deep shadows around here. That's ambient occlusion for you, but not just that, we're going to type the distance here to like something really crazy, like 200. And all of a sudden, your render looks a lot better. Ambient occlusion just like adds depth, a little bit of depth to your shadows. So the next thing we're going to enable here is bloom. And it's not really obvious here. The place where you'll notice bloom the best is when you have a light source in your camera. So that's when you enable, that's when you notice the appeal of bloom. Then we're going to enable screen space reflections. So if you enable that, it's not very obvious what it is. But if you notice somewhere here, this yellow color is kind of reflected on the ground. So the best way to see it, we'll show you how to see it. The best way to see it is if we click on this object now. If we go to the material of this object and we turn down the roughness. Roughness talks about how shiny an object is or how rough it is. So if you turn the roughness to 0, it will be, the floor will be completely made of glass. If you turn it all the way to 1, it will not reflect light. It will not reflect anything at all. It will just be like a rug. It will be, I think it looks pretty good shiny. So I'm just gonna keep it as the rug. But you know, you can decide to make one of these objects over here shiny. So for now, let's leave this as a little bit. So you know what? Let's just make it completely shiny. Because why not? Let's have a fancy, good-looking background. Let's have fancy, good-looking floor. So yeah, so back to our render settings. Remember, I'll come here to this bar here called render properties, click on it, and make sure refraction in this screen space reflection, make sure refraction is enabled as well. And this end where you see trace position, just bump it up to like 1. Increase it. It has no effects on your performance at all. Just bump up all the options. Yeah. That is the best part about Eevee. So now you have that, your scene looks a lot better. So remember, this is how it was before. without any of these options enabled, it looks horrible. But once you enable these options, screen space reflection, bloom, and ambient occlusion, your scene will look a lot better. So Eevee can look really cool. One more thing I want you to make sure you enable or make sure you take note of to make your render look better is that you come to this color management, and if you look at this thing here, come to look and change this to high contrast or very high contrast. So if we change this to high contrast, the colors are now popping on your scene. If you turn this in fact to very high contrast, your colors look really, really, really good. So make sure that this thing is enabled. So to make your Eevee render look good, make sure when you open your Eevee render, because Blender will not do this by default for you, make sure you enable ambient occlusion, screen space reflections, bloom, and make sure on the color management, it is set to very high contrast. So once you do these four things, your render can go from looking like crap to looking really, really good. So this is how your object looks in the rendered view. So right now, let's assume you're satisfied with this now, and you want to, render this as a picture, as a beautiful picture. All you need to do to render your object, to render your scene, is to come to the render button here and press render. But we just had an error, right? You notice, what did it say? No camera found in scenes. Let us talk about the 3D camera objects. So the best way to explain a camera is to imagine that the while we're designing all these beautiful things in the 3D software, when it comes to rendering, the render engine cannot see your 3D scene without the camera. So the only way the render engine can see your 3D scene in order for it to produce a picture out of it, it needs a camera as its eyes to see what exactly it's going to process or what exactly it's going to capture in your scene. So this your scene is just can be very big. You can have multiple millions of objects, but if you don't have a camera, the render engine cannot see what exactly is in your 3D scene. So the camera is the way by which the render engine in your 3D software is able to see your scene and then capture a part of your scene and process that as a picture. So to fix this and add a camera, again, just like any other object, you come to the add menu, you add a camera. And now it's going to put the camera in this location over here. If you move, you just need to move it up and move it out so that it's visible. You can also press S to scale it and make it a bit bigger. It doesn't really change. All it does is it just changes the size of this so that it's the size of this camera icon so that you can select it better. So right now we have a camera here, but we can't really see through the camera. If you want to see what the camera is seeing, you can press 0 on your numpad or 0 on your keys if you've enabled that emulate numpad option to press 0. And this bound here is what the render engine will be seeing. So when we press render now, so if we press render now, it's going to, hold on, you know what, let's just press render now. So if we press render now, this will take a while, but you're going to see that it's just going to see, it's only going to see the region that the camera is seeing. So this is it. This is how it looks like rendered. And you can see that it only sees this region that the camera is seeing. Everything outside it, it does not see. The render you cannot see it. So to specify what you want to specify, what part of your scene you want to turn into a picture, you want to capture, you need a camera to capture it. So now to control a camera, so right now to control a camera, you can press 0 to come out of your camera view. So the next question you ask now is, okay, how do you position your camera such that you can best capture your scene or best frame your scene, kind of like a normal human camera, the way you would set your shot angle? How do you angle your camera and all of that? So there are 4 major ways that you can angle your camera. You can go the manual way by selecting it, moving it around, and then press 0 to view if you've gotten the angle right. Move it around, press 0. Or even when you are in the camera view, press G to move your camera around so that it can view your stuff. you can do that. So this is what I call the manual method. Or there is another method, and this is where I'm going to show you a viewport trick with Blender. So if you move your mouse towards the edge of this viewports, or any viewport at all, if you move your mouse towards the edge, when your mouse cursor turns into this crosshair like this, all you need to do is to click and drag, and all of a sudden you've created split screen in your 3D scene. So this is really, really cool. So you've created a split screen. So now you can have, so what this allows you to do is that now you can press 0 on one scene to frame your camera, and then on the other scene you can be moving the camera around. And the camera is just like any object in 3D, meaning that you can control its position, its rotation, and its you can't really control the scale of the camera. Sadly, the only thing you can scale is the size of this widgets of the camera. You can't really scale the camera itself. So you can move this around and just push this about. So this is the second way, which is using multiple screens. And by the way, if you want to go back to just one screen, come back to this edge again, wait for your mouse, wait until your mouse turns into a crosshair, and then click, and then you drag to the corner. So if you drag to this, that means that this window is going to collapse into this window. And if you move it to here, that means this window here is going to collapse into this window. So it tells you which window will collapse into which. So right now I want our render window to collapse into this window. So we're just going to move our mouse here and let it go. So now it has put us back in our one screen. Third way of angling your camera is by using something called align to view. So for example, if your camera is selected now, make sure your camera is selected now, come to view and come to align view and align active camera to view. So the shortcut is Control Alt and 0. So click that and all of a sudden your camera will enter your 3D, your former 3D view. So remember, we're viewing the camera from this, we're viewing this object from this angle. So if we view this object from this angle and we do that again, view, align view, align camera to view, the camera is just going to jump to whatever view we have. So this is cool if you can rotate your view, your scene around, and then when you are satisfied with your scene and you want the camera to just angle itself according to how you are viewing the scene, you just come again, view, align active camera to view, and the camera will just enter into that view. So now you can just probably move the camera to the side a little bit towards off center, and that's it. The final way to move your camera is something called walk navigation, and this is by far my favorite way of angling your camera in Blender. So if you come back to Blender, let's just move the camera somewhere crazy. So if we come back to Blender, go to our camera view, come back to Blender. So Blender has a way of making you move around the 3D scene as if you are playing a video game. So if you come to view, and so let's come out of our camera first. So if you come to view and you come to viewpoints, come to navigation, sorry, and come to walk navigation, you'll notice that your scene has turned into something like a video game. If you move your mouse, you can look around the scene. And if you press W on your keyboard, or even the arrow keys, you can move around your scene. So right now my scene is lagging because we're seeing the rendered viewpoints. Make sure that if your scene is lagging too much, go back to the object view and come back again to view, navigation, fly navigation. Sorry, not fly navigation. That's not easy to control. Walk navigation. And now you can walk around your scene as if you are playing a video game. So the point is, let's go back to that view so I can see better. So the point is, if we're in the camera view and we go back here, view, navigation, work navigation, we take over control of the camera. We start piloting the camera. So now we can move around the scene like it's a video game, as if we're holding the camera. And we can position ourselves. So we can W to move forward, D to move to the side, to move towards your right, E to move towards your left, S to move back, then Q to go down, E to move up. So we can even see underneath our scene right here, some objects are popping up, but doesn't matter. The camera can see that. So E to go up, Q to go down, W to go forward, E to go to the left, D to go to the right, S to go back. So just then use your mouse to look around. So if you look down and you press S, you can go back and to go. All right. So now we're going to stage our scene. So right now, I think if we go down a little bit, I think this looks pretty good. I think in my eyes. Once you are satisfied, then just left click on your mouse or press enter anyone, and the camera will set itself in that angle. So now that we have the perfect camera angle, we can come to render and render image, and now we will have a nice looking render. So this is our rendered image that we've just created. So if you want to save this picture, you have to come here to image, come to save, and now it's going to ask you where do you want to save it. So I want to save this on my desktop, Blender course folder, and we're going to call this my first render. Oops, I named it wrong, sorry. I'm going to try that again, save again, and call this my first render. It's still the same thing. I don't know why I bothered, but it's alright. It's still the same thing. So press save as image and it will save. So now if you go to your computer, go to your desktop, go to your where that folder is located, you would see the render as a picture PNG file right here. So that's your first render. So make sure you save it. You save this file. Call it my first render. I don't know, I always call things together. Render. So call it my first render. Then also if you come to this output settings here, you can change the resolution of your screen. So maybe if you are posting this on Instagram and you want it to be a square shape, or if you wanted it to be a square shape, you can turn it to let's say 1080 by 1080, and suddenly the camera screen will be square. And if you turn this to 1080 by 1920, you're going to have a vertical video for like Instagram Reels or something. So if you click on this button over here, these three bars or whatever, you can also see other screen formats over here. So I think the default was so the default should be HDTV 1080p. Click that, which is 1920 by 1080. The higher your screen size, the longer it will take to render. So rendering is where most of the work is. What rendering is the computer is calculating is trying to calculate the lights in your scene, calculate the objects in your scene, and try and like generate an image based on those calculations. So the computer is just running some very heavy calculations in the background, which is why it is important that you have a GPU on your computer, because if you don't have a GPU, it's going to use your CPU. So I've tried this in Eevee. Let's see how this will look in cycles. So now to switch to cycle, all I need to do is to press this button here and switch from EV to cycles. So the first thing you'll notice is that it takes a lot longer just for you to view your object in the um, render scene. And the reason it's taking this long is because I'm still using the CPU over here. So if you want to change this, if your cycles render is taking this long and you have a GPU on your computer, you have a graphics card, the best way to solve this, first of all, let's go to objects, viewports, let's go to solid shading mode over here, or just press Z solid to go back to solid mode because rendered mode will take too many resources. Come to edit, come to preferences, come to system, and then in this cycle render devices, click somewhere like CUDA, and your GPU should be listed here. So my GPU is the 940MX. That's my GPU, so make sure it's selected. You notice that if I select other things, if you don't have a compatible GPU, it will show you no compatible GPUs found, but I have one. If you don't have it, show you no compatible GPUs found. So you can still use cycles, you can still render, but it will take way longer for it to finish rendering. So select this and save preferences, close it, and now you change this your device here from CPU to GPU. So now if we come back to press Z on your keyboard and go to rendered view, you would notice that this rendering is a lot faster than when I was using the default CPU options. And also you'll notice that the scene looks a lot better. It looks finer, it looks prettier than EV, but it takes longer to render. So one more thing that you can do, right now it's showing rendering done over here. So one more thing you can do to make it look a lot better, because if you come in, you would notice these things that look like noise around your you'll notice these things that look like noise around your render. So make sure you enable the noise over here. So once you enable the noise in, if I zoom out now, so I just noticed that enabling the noise crashed my system. That's So that's probably what low-end users might be suffering. So if this happens to you, to fix that, make sure you change this from automatic to open image denoiser. So that will fix it. So now if you go back to render, it should begin to render now. And the noise is, however, your render preview will take longer when you enable the noise. So it's best you disable it when you are just moving around the viewport. Just leave it enabled when you are about to render. So you'll notice that it's rendering here a lot faster. It's processing a lot faster. So this is just the main issue with cycles, is that it will take a very long time to render. So to reduce how long it takes to render, there are two things you need to change, which is one, the noise threshold. You want to change your noise threshold to 0.1, and your number of samples. You might not end up needing these 4,000 something samples, so you can change this to like 1,000 samples. In fact, I personally, when I use cycles, which is not often, I usually move it to like 100 samples, but that could be too low for you and your render result might not look sharp. So I recommend you leave that around 1000, which is a nice compromise. And again, make sure your color management is on very high contrast. And yeah, you are done with cycles. So if you come back here and render your image, it's going to take some time to render. So right now it's telling me that I still need more time. Still in sample 23 of 1000. It's going to take a while to render. So this is your first render with cycles. So come here again and press save. and type this as my first cycles render. Now your render is done and saved. Yay!
And that's it for the creation phase of our Introduction to Blender chapter. I hope you have your first project ready and I hope you enjoyed it. In our next lesson, we're going to go into animation, showing you how exactly you can create your first 3D animation in Blender. Like, subscribe, share, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put it in the comment section. Thank you.
Enjoy all these premium courses in this channel for free.
Time to take a chance to